Hello all, thank you for joining me again. I'm inside today because we have quite a serious topic to talk about and I don't want any background noise or masks to distract us. Today I'm going to be teaching you 5 effective techniques for expanding your vocabulary in English. Plus one bonus tip at the end, which is a little different to all the others. Okay, let's start right now. So let me start by telling you a quick personal story. Now, I'm English, but I live in Spain. So I speak Spanish as a second language. But many years ago, I was in a Spanish supermarket and I was looking for the orange juice. And I found the orange juice, but I couldn't find orange juice with pulp. So I found a shop assistant and I asked him in Spanish to show me where the orange juice with pulp is. So I said, zumo de naranja con pulpo. Then I saw the shop assistant kind of stifling a laugh. He was holding back from laughing. And I realized I'd said something wrong. Now, for those who don't speak Spanish, pulpo is octopus. Pulpa is pulp. And when I realized the mistake I'd made, I felt terrible. I felt embarrassed. I felt a little bit humiliated. By the way, the shop assistant was very kind and he knew what I was saying and he took me to the orange juice with pulp. But I've never forgotten that. That memory has stuck in my mind and I've never made that mistake again. I'll always remember that pulpo is octopus, pulpa is pulp. Now, the reason I've never forgotten that is because it has an emotional connection. And this is my first point, and for me it's the most important factor when trying to learn and remember new vocabulary. Now, the emotion I felt, as I said, was embarrassment and a little bit of humiliation, which are actually really good emotions if you want to remember vocabulary. But of course you don't want to put yourself in those situations. So what you need to do, you need to try to simulate strong emotions when you're learning new vocabulary. I'm going to give you an example. A word that we're going to be using a lot in the next few months is curfew. Now, curfew is a regulation requiring people to stay at home during specific hours, usually at night. So that's the definition, that's the dictionary definition. But it's very difficult to remember the word curfew just from that definition, that technical definition. You need to make an emotional connection. So tell yourself a story in your head. So maybe you were out with your friends enjoying a good time and you realized it was late and you only had 10 minutes before the curfew. So you had to run home and you saw the police and the police were going to catch you, but you just arrived home before the curfew started. So you've created this emotional connection, this a little bit of fear, anxiety, stress. In a story, it's not real, but you've simulated this emotional connection. So you will have a better chance of remembering the word curfew in the future. The second important technique for learning new vocabulary is context. Context is key. Now, I always encourage my students to take notes of new vocabulary. So after a few months or years, they tend to have these huge lists of vocabulary with their definitions or translations into their own languages. And that's fine, that's good, but in the end they're just lists in black and white on a page. And it's very, very difficult to remember words just from a list with the definitions. So you need context, you need to put these words into context. Let me give you another example. Let's look at the phrasal verb to get rid of, which means to dispose of, to eliminate, or to discard. So you're not going to remember a complicated phrasal verb like get rid of just from the definition or even the translation. You may remember it for a few hours or a day or so, but in a couple of weeks you will not remember that phrasal verb unless you put it in context. So for example, you could say, I wish we hadn't got rid of all those books when we moved. I really miss them now. Again, here you have the context for getting rid of old books, but also you have the emotional connection which I spoke about just now. The context is so important for really understanding how we use in this case the phrasal verb, but it can be any vocabulary, really. Okay, so context is key, extremely important. You must also be selective. Let's be realistic, you're not going to learn all the words in the English language. That's just not going to happen. Your brain has a limited capacity. So you need to select the words that you think are going to be more useful to you. So words that maybe you think you're going to use for work, for your studies, for travel, for speaking with friends, etc. It's personal to each individual. So let's look at an example from a book on music. While Lennon-McCartney's achievement in almost single-handedly sweeping away the songwriting incumbency of Denmark Street is as easily underestimated as their role in promoting the English language around the world, the most remarkable single thing about them, particularly by the standards of today, is that for nearly 5 years they got better and better at what they did. So some of the words in that text are extremely useful, like underestimated, remarkable, achievement. They're worth learning, they're worth retaining. But other words like incumbency and sweeping away, do you really think you're ever going to use those words? Probably not. When you're reading a book like this, yeah, you understand it, enjoy it, but don't worry about words which are not really essential or not really useful to your English. My fourth tip is to make categories or word groups. Now, one of my best students uses this technique to great success, so well done, Jesus. But I think other people can use it and get similar benefit from it. Now, the idea is to form categories or groups of words with similar meanings. So, groups of words and expressions. So let's look at an example. Let's look at a simple verb, to like. Let's think of some expressions that are similar to like. To be keen on. So I'm keen on photography, for example. My cup of tea. So romantic comedy films are not my cup of tea. To be into. He is really into jazz music. And to be mad for. So she used to be mad for One Direction. So these are all expressions which are very similar to like, but with different nuances, slightly different meanings. But you're putting them in the same category. So when it comes time to remember them, you can visualize in your mind the diagram and the categories that you have. That will really help you to remember. And these diagrams can get bigger and bigger. Obviously you don't want them too big because they'll get very confusing. But it's a very good way of visualizing these words on paper. And as you can see, I've used examples for the context too. And my fifth tip is you have to use the vocabulary or you will lose it. It's quite obvious. I think most people know it, but it's worth reminding you. Let's look at this quote from Confucius. Get a bit pretentious here with Confucius. So it's a very famous quote from him. He said, "I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand." So you have to use the vocabulary, you have to do the practical part of it to really understand the words, the vocabulary that you're using. So now I know many people don't have opportunities to speak in English on a day-to-day basis, but you can write little stories for yourself or write comments on YouTube videos, Facebook groups, or just for yourself. And as I've said in a previous video, you can talk to yourself just to use the new vocabulary and really internalize the vocabulary so it sticks in your mind. And I promised you a bonus tip. As I said, it's a little bit different to the others because it's not about learning new vocabulary, because you actually have a huge bank of vocabulary already that you don't use. And that's called your passive vocabulary. Now, we all have active and passive vocabulary, and our passive vocabulary is much bigger than our active vocabulary. So when it's in your second language, you'll get great benefit from moving that passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary. And you can do that just by being proactive, again, using the vocabulary. Pay attention to the vocabulary you know but you don't use, and start using it in writing, in speaking, to force it from the passive part of your brain to the active part of your brain. As I said, you have this huge bank of vocabulary that you understand. When you read a book, you understand all these words. When somebody is speaking, you understand the words, but you don't use them yourself. So yeah, that's the bonus tip. Passive to active. What about you? Do you have any extra tips you can share with us in the comments? That would be really useful if you could do that. Yeah, like and subscribe if you liked the video. And yeah, thank you for joining me. I'll see you again very soon for another video. Bye bye.